Let's check what can we do in Averbakh now. And the Averbakh variation in the King's Indian, d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2, they usually start with short castle, and bishop g5. So by developing the two bishops, white keeps both possibilities, one to go to long castle and to continue attack with h4, h5 sometimes, or to at some convenient moment to go with short castle. Sometimes they even keep in mind this f4, e5 ideas. So it's quite aggressive setup. And again, like in all other examples, when we saw this bishop out on e3, on g5, always c5, always c5, so it's easy to remember. Here as well, c5 is very strong. After dc5, again we jump to a5. Sorry, dc5, in this case, we take on c5 and queen d8, rook d8. So now important. If f4, then we have time to bring our knight to c6 and to control this d4 square. For example, knight f3, h6, bishop h4, knight h5 with advantage. If he goes e5 on the ninth move after taking the rook, the queen on d8, then we typically go knight d7, knight fd7. So taking on e7 here, we always can play rook e8, and if he goes here e6, then knight f6, and already we have an excellent situation because all pieces will get out, and the point that the pawn in e7 is weak, it's not that important. So that's more or less about this dc5. And this is always important to know, because many times we don't play c5 because we are afraid of we are not sure about what to do on dc5 and on e5, this type of reactions. But here it's good enough for black. So the main line, of course, after c5, they have to play d5. Then again, like in previous files with h3, we also go for e6 in order to get the play into some Benoni type of positions. On knight f3, if he just wants to transpose to the Benoni, we ask him, as my coach, my King's Indian coach and my general coach Zigor Slanka used to say, checking the documents here where the bishop will go, because if he goes to h4, then by g5, bishop g3, ed, cd, and knight h5, we capture this bishop. If he goes here to e3, then we can jump to, after ed, we will jump to g4. And there is a nice tactical motive after bishop d2 here. Yeah, this unexpected, to be honest. ed. Sorry, if he goes 9, bishop e3, then we take on d5. If he takes ed5, we go knight g4. I missed one move. First, he can go bishop f4 here. If bishop d2 simply knight d7. But the tactical point was with bishop f4, g5. And after bishop d2 here, already knight f2 is working, because we have this nice move, g4. And the king is under serious attack. For example, rook e1, gf3, bishop f3, knight d7, and we get the knight to e5. It's excellent knight on e5. This is good play. ed5, it's one option. Another option is for him to take with the pawn c on d5, on which we have very typical move, b5, like in Benoni. This we know from Benoni. because if he takes with the knight, we can take simply the pawn on e4. If he takes with the bishop, then we take knight e4, knight e4, queen a5. It's a Benoni-like type of situation. Queen d2, queen b5. It's very similar to the main line of Benoni. Knight d6, queen a6, knight c8, rook c8. But now problems to make a castle for him. So he has to do something about it, or to go to the endgame after queen e2, queen e2. We don't play, we play queen a5, queen d2, and this is a kind of move repetitions. So that's all about after e6, knight f3. Then we have to take after h6, bishop e3 to take on d5. Also, he can try here to take the pawn on e6. In this case, we take with the bishop, of course. Knight f3, we settle the queen on b6, taking the time to attack the bishop. The pawn on b2. Rook b1, knight c6. Nobody will take this pawn on d6, of course. Short castle. And immediately we jump knight d4. So, I mean, already we have a very comfortable situation, and the initiative is in our hands. That's why on e6 they all play here queen d2. We take. I wouldn't even discuss seriously the cd5 move here, because after a6, a4, rook e8, knight f3, we have a very strong idea. h6 and comfortable version of Benoni. After ed5, usually they take ed5. Yeah. Queen b6, knight f3, and bishop f5. Of course, one of the main ideas of bishop f5 is to jump to e4, knight e4, and to open the black square bishop. For example, if he is trying to take away the rook from this diagonal on rook c1, then after rook e8, we want to attack in the center. The most important thing here is after queen b6, knight f3, bishop f5. It's the move knight h4. And actually, this line, we have to be very careful and to remember well, because after knight h4, the line starts to be very forced. Knight e4, knight e4, bishop e4. Now, of course, we want to take on b2, so he has to do something about this. He attacks on e4, our bishop, and important intermediate move, counter-attack by h6, also attacking his bishop. h6, bishop h6, bishop h6. This is very important first line. On this line, the whole concept of c5 against Averbakh is built. But it's only one line to remember, so this is not so difficult to do it. Take on b2. Now he has two moves, rook c1 and short castle immediately. If rook c1, we have to force him to go away, or to play queen d2 back by playing rook e8. For example, if he takes our bishop, then rook e4, short castle, and here we use this nice tactical motive, queen d4 check first, and then we take on h4, and then bring the knight to d7. This is fine. If 17 he goes short castle, another difficult. If he goes 17 short castle, it's another difficult move for black. Sorry, but we can afford it to remember. This is the move bishop c2 here, and typical for exactly this setup. Because remember, he also has some problems here. One of the problems is bishop on e2, and another problem, maybe sometime we can give check and take on h4. So I mean, it's both hanging. So bishop c2 after short castle, queen d2, and everything it's it's based on this situation that the knight on h4 is unprotected. So we get rid of the spin. We have the move queen f6 and g3, bishop f4. Okay, now we survived and we have normal natural position. One more point for you: if immediately he goes queen d2 here, because it's, you see, it's everything about this bishop on f5. If immediately he goes, there is no really squares for us. But somehow we hold. Even after queen d2, we have queen f6, g3, bishop f5. And we saved the piece and normal position. Last line here after queen takes b2, immediately short castle. Again, our move bishop c2. So here we keep in mind this, usually this check on d4. For example, if he goes king h1, so there is no threats created after knight a6. Always when he will come back to d2, we will have queen f6. Remember this, keep it in mind. Otherwise, for example, we can do it in this version: queen d2, rook a8, and if he makes some move like rook c1, then queen f6. Or 17, not king h1. If he goes queen d2 immediately, then already we can change the picture into our favor by giving this check, connecting the pawn with the bishop, with also good perspectives for black. So let's have a summary on what is going on in the Averbakh variation for black. This is rather new for me myself. For example, before I was playing differently, but now I see this plan c5 as the most straight way of facing the Averbakh. And only one thing we have to know this to remember this: the whole fourth line with this exchanges on h6 on b2. Critical point, I think, for our understanding is to we have to be careful about this white square bishop, which is jumping from f5 to e4 to c2. But thanks to the bad position of the knight on h4, we can always save it. And since the central pawn is destroyed, so I mean, we just after that we have normal position with equal chances.